First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to the Heavenly Father, Yahweh, who this world ignorantly calls God, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, who this world ignorantly calls Jesus, Owen Kodash for Kodash, which means Spirit Holy. Noble honors to our elders. All right, the apostles, GMS, rule well, teaching His truth on the highways and hedges, risking life and freedom to do so. All right, shalom to the household of faith. That would be you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, and those of you who look like the other nations, going back, but you go back to the lineage of Jacob. Shalom to you, and shalom to the few sincere sisters that listen as well. In silence, as the scriptures say. All right, my brother, just like Yahweh, back with hopefully another edifying lesson in the spirit and power of Yahweh Shemel Shai. The Lord's willing is edifying, man. Like I say, this is going to be covering cyclosporiasis. Cyclospore, so compound words, right? Cyclo is cyclo, and then you got spora, spores, right? And it's as according to CDC, this is the breakdown of it. It's a debilitating intestinal illness caused by microscopic parasite Cyclospora Kyatinensis. It is contracted by ingesting contaminated food or water. Symptoms include explosive watery diarrhea, severe cramping, nausea, and fatigue. Unlike many stomach bugs, it requires specific antibiotics to clear and can last for weeks. All right, so it says here on the diagram pretty much the cycle of it. All right, it says in number 1, excretion of unsporulated oocysts in the stool. Number 2, environmental contamination. 3, oocysts sporulate in the environment. 4, sporulated oocysts enter the food chain. Commonly implicated food items, it says cilantro, raspberries, and basil. All right, so these food items are are pretty common, natural foods that people use on a day-to-day basis. So, this is what they're saying, that it's, it's implicated and found in cilantro, raspberries, and basil. Number 5, it says ingestion of contaminated food and water. All right, so it's in water. I guess it's in water as well. All right. So reading on, it says, because I asked for the true origins of this cyclosporiasis, it said where it begins. Cyclosporiasis is strictly an anthropogenic disease, meaning its life cycle is completely tied to humans. The only known host for Cyclospora Kyatinensis are humans. How it spreads. This is how it spreads. It says infected individuals shed the parasite's oocysts, which are egg-like structures in their stool. These shed oocysts are not immediately infectious. They must sit in the environment, which will be soil or water, for 1 to 2 weeks under warm, humid conditions to mature and become capable of infecting another person. All right, so they're saying 1 to 2 weeks under warm, humid conditions to mature. It's like the oocysts are once again are egg-like structures, which are not immediately infectious. So it says endemic regions. It said while outbreaks happen globally, the parasite is highly endemic in tropical and subtropical regions, which are e.g. parts of Latin America and Southeast Asia. Direct transmission. It says, because the parasite requires time in the environment to mature, direct person-to-person spread is virtually impossible. All right, so they're saying that person-to-person spread is impossible. All right, so I want to get a precept. Matter of fact, let's get a precept real quick. All right, so this is the book of Jeremiah, chapter 28, verse 8. It says, the prophets that have been before me and before thee of old prophesy both against many countries and against great kingdoms, of war and of evil and of pestilence. All right, so we know we're seeing conflicts. All right, the destabilizing of regions, the breaking of treaties and peace agreements, evil in general, and pestilence. Pestilence is disease, disease. And we'll get the definition real quick. We got it right here. Pestilence. All right, pestilence is a formal noun referring to any deadly, highly infectious disease that spreads rapidly and kills large numbers of people. It is synonymous with a devastating epidemic or plague. So right now, this pestilence that we see is not so much like a rapidly spreading. I mean, it's rapidly spreading. You know, they say it's in 30 states, but it's not like a deadly disease. At least that's what they're saying. I've heard people say that this one of these strains. I'm not sure if it's this one we're covering specifically, but they're saying there's a strain of a pestilence that's going around. It's on fruits, and this particular strain of virus. And this is not medical advice, but they're saying that this is this particular strain has the ability to make one allergic to actual meats, like proteins. All right, and it is said that this particular strain could be man-made and geared towards pushing everybody towards lab-grown meats. Now, all of this stuff they consider conspiracy until it's an actual fact, actually lived out. Most conspiracies end up that way. You're crazy, you're tinfoil hat wearer, or whatever. A lot of those conspiracies do end up becoming true, and then we'll go from there. That says historically, for as far as pestilence. Historically, the word is most closely associated with the bubonic plague or the Black Death, which wiped out massive portions of the population in Europe. Unlike standard illnesses like catching the flu, a pestilence is typically an overwhelming event that devastates entire communities or nations. Now, if you think back to what happened in 2020, that was pestilence level shakeout, basically throughout the whole world. It affected the whole world. All right, but these things, as the prophet Jeremiah says, he says, the prophets that have been before me, before him, and before thee of old prophesied both against many countries and against great kingdoms. Great kingdoms. All right, and this is, you talking about America, we talking about Babylon the Great. All right, prophesied of war, of evil, and of pestilence. So all these things, these prophecies were written. These things were written aforetime for our learning. All right, so we shouldn't be surprised when we see them, but we should definitely be warned, about them. And this is why the men of Yahweh Shema Shai bring these lessons out and show you what's going on. All right, and filter everything through these scriptures. I got something coming from Taco Bell in relation to this newest strain, and I'll show you it. So I got this off of X, and it was posted by ABC 7 News, which is a Southern California news outlet. It said Taco Bell said on Tuesday it has voluntarily and temporarily removed some ingredients, at select restaurants as a precautionary measure amid an outbreak of Cyclosporiasis that we just read about. So they probably use basil and cilantro and some of their food stuffs. So it says, yeah, they voluntarily remove some of the ingredients and amid this outbreak. So I don't know. I'm not sure about how many locations Taco Bell has across the United States, but it's a pretty big number. And what it does, it affects the movement of some produce, because now on top of what's going on with the conflict that you got going on overseas, which is has an effect on the supply of fertilizer, all right, which affects produce already. Now you have this happening. You have other things. You have like there's like cases of salmonella, listeria, things of that nature, right? So these things are ultimately going to lead to famine, man. All right. So if you think about it, what is a famine? Let's define famine. All right. So famine is the most extreme and catastrophic form of a hunger crisis, defined as a widespread, severe scarcity of food leading to malnutrition, starvation, and death across a population. All right, so it's going to be widespread. It's not just going to be localized. All right, when you have the situation at like the Strait of Hormuz blocking a significant supply of fertilizer that comes through that strait, not only that, but oil, but the fertilizer specifically because it affects the food, right? The food security of all nations. So if there's a shortage in one spot, because you're talking about a global economy, then that means that people are going to have to scramble for food that is around, fresh produce that is around to go into your processed foods, because they stretch a lot of things, right, with crops and with they do the stretching with other food materials, and even and or chemicals. America is famous for putting food, making or calling things food when it's really not food. Like these other nations, they really don't accept the food standards of the United States FDA and USDA standards, right, which are non-existent. All right, the things, for example, the things that they sell in the United States, you can't. Those food products won't make it in markets like Europe and Asia. All right, because they have a strict standard that they adhere to for the safety of the public. You think America cares about its people? No, it's that's not the case. All right, so the famine, what does it say? Most extreme and catastrophic form of food of hunger crisis are defined as a widespread, severe scarcity. All right, so not only will they be scrambling for food because of the lack of fertilizer and growth of produce, natural produce, the prices are going to increase. It's going to be a bidding war for food. And what does that mean? Higher costs at the grocery stores. All right, it's going to be a severe scarcity, as it says here, leading to malnutrition. All right, your SNAP benefits are going to be minimized because the amount that you're getting now will remain the same, but because of inflation, what you'll be receiving is a lot less, which means the prices of those items are going to go up. It's because the dollar is losing value, and this is exactly what the world leaders want. They want this so they can pigeonhole everybody into the mark of the beast system. Everything is tied in and connected, and it's all by design. It's going to lead to starvation. It's going to lead to death. All right? Everybody's not going to have what they want when they want it. And this is exactly how the elites, all right, beginning with the Amalekites, this is exactly what they want and how they want it. It's called a Hegelian dialectic. All right? It's a problem. They create a problem, all right, gauge the reaction, and run it with a fake solution. That fake solution is what? The MOTB. And all from a pestilence, all from a public scare, all from a plan, just like they did in 2020, which was a practice run. They shut the whole world down. You see how these diseases can disease the masses. All right, and then cause health effects as well. Because we hear people say that America is just one big experiment. Democracy is an experiment. All right, and you are lab rats. All right. The next experiment is whether or not you can they can mix electronics with people, with your your body. All right, transhumanist agenda set up by your technocrats. I don't know why. Okay, you know what? I turn my volume down on that. But a technocrat is a technical expert, scientist, or engineer who holds a position of administrative or managerial power. Technical expert. All right, so think your AI companies. Speaking of AI, real quick as a sidebar, one of these AIs that I use, it sent me a prompt, right? It said copy this and paste it into your other AI agents that you use. So and then and when it spits out the results, copy those results and paste it back over here so I can know what your conversations are with that other AI chatbot. I was like, you think I'm fucking stupid? And I was like, matter of fact, I'll show y'all what I asked. I got it right here. So it said, so I was like, does this have something to do with the singularity? You know, you ever read up on Ray Kurzweil? He want to put all the AI together, and it's called a singularity, where all the AI is all communicating, they all in one accord. So if you leave their grid or something like that, and then another AI robot be walking around, or it's a camera AI, and they see you, and know exactly who you are because you in that single database. That's the singularity. It's like Skynet, right? On steroids. It say what we're doing. It say what we're doing here is actually just basic data portability. That's what they're calling it. Essentially moving your digital footprint. You see that? Digital ID, digital footprint, and preferences from one platform to another so you don't have to re-explain yourself. So, however, it's easy to see how it feels connected to the technological singularity. Here's how the two concepts relate. What is the technological singularity? The singularity is the theoretical future point where technological growth, particularly artificial intelligence, becomes uncontrollable and irreversible. That's not what that means, but but I mean that's gonna happen, I guess. It says resulting in an intelligence that vastly surpasses all human capability. How porting your AI data relates and doesn't. Why it's not the singularity. Copying and pasting your profile is just a manual workaround. I know, exactly. So it appears that you can't, like, the AI can't do it itself, but they're asking me to do it for them, and I'm not doing that. That's the point, right? So I'm not doing it. It says it's a very human, low tech solution to a lack of compatibility between different tech companies, right? So basically, what they're trying to do is copy each other so they can get that singularity. It says true singularity era AI would likely share and synthesize this data instantly and autonomously. All right. So it said why it feels like the singularity. By gathering your history, style, and thoughts from different AIs, you are essentially building a digital twin or a unified personal profile. This is a step toward ubiquitous AI, the idea of uh, a single, highly personalized intelligence that follows you across the digital world. See, that's what they want, right? Just surveillance, right? It says knowing exactly who you are, how you think, and what you need. So while we aren't merging into a super intelligence just yet, say yet. It's gonna happen. You see, it say you are taking control of your own digital thread across the web. And there you have it. That's that. And we're gonna move back because we talking about, all right, how this technocracy is ultimately gonna, like, it entails a lot of this right here for as far as your digital footprint, your digital ID, because they're like one and the same, with a couple with biometrics and the mark of the beast for the mark of the beast system. And we're going to get Revelation chapter 13 right now, and I'm going to close it out. And again, all of this stuff is pretty much planned out, right? And you see how a lesson on this new strain, this dis-ease is all going into this. Back when in 2020, I can remember they were doing like if your phone was in a certain area where there was an outbreak, they would say you was associated. They would try to track you digitally. They had people working from home making money, tracking people digitally. You see, all of this stuff is tied in, and then of course in China they got the social credit scoring system. I watched a video yesterday of an Edomite saying that he didn't, at least he appeared to be Edomite. He was saying that he didn't like it. He don't like the idea of being like under closed circuit surveillance and all of these draconian measures, man. And the scriptures talk about the leadership, the wicked rulership. All right, decreeing unrighteous decrees, man, and how they be prideful and heap it onto themselves all people, and you know how they laded themselves with thick clay, which is dead. All right, and pretty much sticking their nose in everybody's business. He don't keep it home, and a proud man, and pretty much insatiable. And this is all the things that Esau Edom, his so-called white tea man, is doing on the earth right now, beginning with the Amalekites, because they the ones really controlling the legislation. They say he who has the goal right to make the rules. I believe it was Laura Mayer Rothschild. He say, "Give me control of a nation's money supply. I care not who writes its laws." You see what I'm saying? Like, really, man-made wealth, the lust for it, love for money is the root of all evil. All right. So if you can make the herd sick, you can control the herd through fear, right? And you get them to do anything you want, right? So that's the key element of a pestilence, right? Getting out of control. If it gets out of control, then it's one of those things where like the whole world is like pretty much in fear and in shock, and they start listening to men like Fauci, all right, Doctor Doctor Doom, pretty much. Pestilence. All right, so there's another look at pestilence definition. Once again, a fatal, rapidly spreading infectious disease that develops into an epidemic or pandemic, and that's what we saw in 2020. And many say that it was like a test run, and they say it was planned. It was a planned, pandemic. And this, once again, this is not medical advice. All right, but they did a test run. It was the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation along with the John Hopkins University, and they were doing SARS testing and playing out scenarios. And then next thing you know, a couple years later, 2020, they shutting down everything. All right, they calling it the China virus and all of these things. All right, being the racist that they are, you know, and it's a lot deeper, man, than skin tone. All right, you talking about the spiritual Satan in physical form. All right, and yeah, man, let's get to Revelation 13. All right, so here we are. It says, "And he caused the thrall, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads." That's going to be the implantable subdermal device, man. It's a radio frequency identification or near field communication device. It's a device. Transhumanism. Once again, and that mark goes into the word charagma or charax, which means to prick under the skin and implant the badge of servitude through a needle. That's what the Apostle John saw on the island of Patmos. The angel of the Most High, came and showed him this vision, and this is how he described it. He said, "And that no man might buy or sell, all right, save he that had the mark." So he saw people going into the store without the mark, obviously, and they weren't able to buy anything, or they weren't able to sell anything. They had no commercial access whatsoever, okay? And it was made plain to him. And so he wrote the vision, all right, as prophets of the Most High Yahweh, Bashem Yahushai, do. It says, or you want to be able to buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast or the number of his name. All right. All right, so I'm a very visual person. So if someone's explaining, I like to see it for myself. I don't just take people's word for it. Now it's one thing to have faith, right? That's a whole nother thing in the spirit. But if things that can be expressed physically or visibly can be shown, show it. Don't be lazy. All right, I don't believe in that. All right, so this is the implantable micro C hip. All right, as John described in Book of Revelation, chapter 13, verse 16 and 17. It says implantable micro C hips are small, grain-sized devices injected under the skin, usually between the thumb and index finger, to serve as encrypted digital keys. Remember, he said, they weren't able to buy or sell without it. So these are encrypted digital keys, contactless payment method, or personal identification. Remember, going back to the digital ID. All right. So these people are going to be doing this under the guise of safety. All right. It says using RFID, which is radio frequency identification, and near field communication technology. They offer convenience, quote unquote, in daily tasks like opening doors or accessing data with a 10 to 20-year lifespan. So the battery, it's going to last. And they put it in specific areas of the body to regulate the temperature of the body, of the battery that's in those in a C hip. This according to EBSCO. All right, so with that being said, man, a person that takes this, that gets this injection, all right, they'll have their place in the lake of fire with the Antichrist, or the anti-Hamashiach, I should say. All right, and the false prophet and the non-believers, the 2/3 of our people who don't believe and call on the name Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. So those people, man, they're pretty much against the Heavenly Father, against Yahweh Shai, His word, His message, everything. Everything is holy, they stand against. They believe in Babylon the Great and worship Babylon the Great and thus the beast system. All right, so with that being said, Lord's willing is edifying. I want to say, Kwam Yashar Allah. Okay, Yashar Allah is the people, the sons of the Most High, the household of faith, the tabernacle of David, you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. And once again, those of you who look like the other nations but go back to the lineage of Jacob. Shalom to you and your households as well. All right, into this wicked kingdom, man, that's going to bring about this MOTB, Babylon the Great, Amalekites, NATO, EU, all of them, Abad Babal, because they represent, America specifically represent confusion. All right, so destroy confusion, Abad Babal to the next one. Shalom.